Right now, you heard in the news break that there are a couple of lawsuits now facing the state of California over this ridiculous law that really proposes that one must jump through new hoops now to get on the ballot for the primaries. I'll let Tom Fitton explain it all, as his group Judicial Watch is heading up one of those lawsuits. And Tom, thanks for joining us.
Hey, good to be with you again, Larry. Thanks for having me.
So what is this lawsuit about? Why is it out of line for the state of California to say, if you want to be on a primary ballot here, you got to show us your tax returns?
Because there are limited qualifications set by the Constitution, not states, for getting on the ballot for president and determining the qualifications for president. This relates to your citizenship status and your age, essentially. And California wants to add a new requirement to become president, which is to make your tax returns public. And it's obviously aimed at President Trump, but it's got this broader negative impact on our rights as citizens to elect presidents of our choice. And that's why we're representing voters who object to this.
Can I, do they have some wiggle room here? I understand the argument with regard to the Constitution laying out what the conditions are to be president, and the state doesn't have the right to add to that. But this law is specific to the primary ballot. Is that how they're getting around that? It's like, oh, we're not precluding you from being president with this. It's just to get the nomination.
You're precluding them from being president. In this case, President Trump would not be on the primary ballot, and he would not be on the ballot for president at the general election. And Jerry Brown.
Right? Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, Jerry Brown initially vetoed a version of this bill because he recognized it as unconstitutional. They, insufficiently amended it to make it constitutional, but they can't make it constitutional because they have added an additional unconstitutional hurdle. And just think, right. Can other states require medical records, birth certificates, social media posts, educational records, genetic testing?
Right. Where does it end? And by the way, Tom, it seems to me that someone does have the right to privacy here. I mean, the IRS at 1040 is supposed to be confidential. How can a state compel you to make that public just because you want to run for elected office?
Well, that's right. And obviously there are state tax records as well that are also private. This is an assault on President Trump. So, I mean, you're assuming there's a rational basis here, and there really isn't. Yeah. It's about getting Trump. And when you target someone specifically because you don't like their politics, it's hard to maintain any sense in terms of legality or constitutionality. And that's our concern here. Obviously, President Trump is the imminent target here. But it's a broader issue where you have a state seeking to upend the Constitution by adding a requirement to running for president that isn't there.
What is the timeline for this? Because the nomination process is coming up soon. I think that the California primary has actually been pushed up a little bit this year. So we're only looking, I think, at about a 7 or 8 month window, and usually federal court cases can't go that quickly.
Yeah, we'll have to seek an injunction because I think the practical deadline for turning over your documents would be in November. So, as you point out, lawsuits take longer than that most times. So we'll have to seek relief from the court before then. And, I'm not sure who else is sued. I suspect others will sue as well, including the president himself, perhaps, because he has an interest here. But, voters are being abused in this process. We represent Democrats, a Democrat, a Republican, an independent. And this is something that impacts members of both political parties. You shouldn't be restricted unlawfully from having your choice of candidates by politicians who've decided that the Constitution doesn't matter.
We're speaking with Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, who has just filed a lawsuit against the state of California. You've had to tangle with California quite a bit lately, including the settlement you reached finally recently about the Los Angeles County cleaning up the voter rolls. Can I get an update on that process of that one? As what was it, 1.5 million people who shouldn't be on the voter rolls?
That's right. They did a mailing totaling 1.6 million names, which will begin the process of removing those names. These are inactive voters, assuming they don't respond or otherwise vote. the next two federal elections. So it's going to take a few years to get these names cleaned up, but we believe names can begin to be removed immediately, and we're getting indications other areas of the state are also beginning to take steps to clean up their lists thanks to this litigation and settlement. So it's a major issue having this massive pool of inactive names, because it's a pool to which fraudsters can dip into to get names that they want to vote illegally on behalf of.
Tom Fitton, also at Judicial. You've been very busy here. You and I have spoken quite a bit about the actions of the FBI and the Justice Department under Barack Obama during that 2016 election, and you've been a pretty harsh critic of the entire investigation, from Comey's investigation to then the Robert Mueller investigation. I'm really reading with great interest this latest release. You've got about 14 different referrals of FBI employees for leaking classified information. This is a disaster for the FBI that they allow this to happen.
Yeah, I think, and only 3 of them were fired, including the assistant FBI director, Andrew McCabe. And Comey wasn't fired for leaking. Remember, he did the leaking of President Trump's files illegally after he left the position as FBI director. It was a vendetta because of his firing. So,
and let's just be clear, when this says 14 referrals, so people understand what that means 14 individuals, right, who worked at the FBI. They could have been guilty of multiple leaks.
Yeah, those are the leaks they were caught engaging in. And, I don't know about you, but if FBI officials are accessing documents or data and releasing it improperly, that in the least ought to be a fireable offense. And certainly, only 3 of them were fired. Only 1 is facing a criminal prosecution. So, I encourage people to go to our website at judicialwatch.org and read the details, because it'll make your hair stand on end when you see what these FBI agents were doing to little or no consequence, in my view.
And this is part of the problem in Washington, D.C., with this relationship between the media and people who work in sensitive areas of our government, where this information can be leaked, and it's always selective leaks, and it's always done for political purposes. These are not elected officials. These are not people who are supposed to be driving the political agenda in this town. But so often we see this happen, Tom. It's incredibly frustrating for voters.
It is, and these are FBI officials who gain the notice within their own agency for doing something wrong, and their internal watchdog tried to police them, and many times they were cut off. You have agents who were referenced for, or officials who were referenced for firing because of this misconduct. Nothing happened. You have others who were authorized for lengthy dismissals. They get or suspensions in the least. They get letters of censure. It shows you that the corruption at the FBI is more significant than we even understand. And it's not because you have a lot of people committing misconduct. It's because when those who do commit misconduct are caught, not much is done about it.
Meanwhile, you also have, I'm sorry, you guys have been so busy, Tom, that I'm going to try to get to as many of these as we can. You're now looking for a FOIA request with regard to the city of South Bend, Indiana, and Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who, of course, as we know, is, I guess one of the top-tier candidates running for the Democratic nomination. What is it you're trying to glean about his record?
Well, his city of South Bend, and Buttigieg specifically, helped set up this program for municipal IDs to help illegal aliens conduct business more easily with the city. And we thought that was of interest. We asked for documents about it, and they've been giving us the runaround. And we do FOIA a lot. We do the Indiana version of FOIA requests to South Bend, and it was nothing but games. And we tried to be accommodating to their request to help narrow the request, all the sorts of things you would do, so you just get the documents without having to sue. But the fact is, we had to sue. It shows you what their attitude was to transparency on this issue that is mightily controversial.
Yeah, and sadly, this is a nonpartisan attitude that we see across the board. You're still fighting with the Justice Department now 2.5 years into President Trump's presidency. You're still fighting with them to get information, and from the State Department. They have not come clean with things that go back to the Obama administration and when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. When people use the term deep state, this is this entrenched bureaucracy that you're constantly fighting against.
That's true. And, frankly, the appointees of the administration need to start taking ownership about this because it isn't like we haven't been loud about it. For instance, the FBI is still withholding a bunch of the Peter Strzok and Lisa Page documents, Larry, and they want to take 2 years to turn over 13,000 pages of records. We were in court last week, and the court said, see if you can narrow it to help speed it along. And my view is, we've already narrowed it. And, why is it that the FBI just can't release these documents in a timely way as opposed to pretending that their resources are stretched? And all it does is it protects, obviously, the corruption that the FBI and these two specific people, and of course, while also harming President Trump, because if the truth came out, President Trump would be better off, and they don't want that to happen. At least that's my perspective on it.
And let's see, Tom, I'm just doing the math here. Now, I could be wrong because I'm just a radio host, but 2 years from now, there'll be a new president then, won't there? I mean, if they're saying it's going to take 2 years, it's possible that new president might not then prioritize the release of this information. So maybe they're playing out the clock. I could be wrong here.
It could be President Buttigieg. That's right. You never know.
Tom Fitton, great.
And that's right. And we already know from the documents that have been released thus far, we've gotten a lot of big material showing collusion with specifically the Clinton lawyers on both targeting Trump and protecting Hillary. So I can imagine there's all sorts of other interesting things there. And you know what they're withholding, though? All their, quote, personal communications, which range, I think it's almost nearly half the material that they've been withheld. Half the material has been withheld because it's, quote, personal. Well, isn't that interesting? Their scandalous relationship is also being protected by the FBI.
They're allowed to have their personal time on our dime while they're working for us. Do
you spend 43% of your work emails on personal business?
Oh, please. If my wife wants to talk to me, she has to call the 800 number to speak on the air. That's how busy I am. Tom Fitton, we got to leave it there. Thank you for the work you're doing over at Judicial Watch. I don't care who the president is. I don't care who has the majority in the House or the Senate. Judicial Watch at judicialwatch.org. They continue to do real oversight, and you should keep them going. Tom, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Larry. Bye-bye.